Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or our SoundCloud page at soundcloud.com/thedirectorscut. For this episode, we're breaking from the norm and bringing you something special. In honor of the 68th Annual DGA Awards, which took place earlier this month, we're going to devote the next few episodes of The Director's Cut to our popular Meet the Nominees feature film symposium. Now in its 25th year, the event is a roundtable discussion with the directors nominated for the Guild's Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Feature Film. On February 6th, Alejandro Iñárritu, the director of The Revenant, Tom McCarthy, the director of Spotlight, Adam McKay, the director of The Big Short, George Miller, the director of Mad Max Fury Road, and Ridley Scott, the director of The Martian, all gathered at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles to discuss the making of their films with moderator Jeremy Kagan. So enjoy part 1 of our Meet the Nominees special and hear about the ideas that inspired these films, the advice our nominees took to heart when they started out their careers, as well as anecdotes about the casting process for each film. Enjoy!
As we get started, this is a rare opportunity for all of us to be with such skilled craftspeople as we get ourselves wired in. As you know, this is an audience of directors and assistant directors and production managers, associate directors. This is an audience of your peers who are here to, in fact, learn from you. That's what this is about. And as we get wired in, I'm thinking, since we're interested in learning from you, my first question is, what have you learned from other directors? Anything specific that you learned from another director? George, any advice from any director that you ever encountered, or having seen other directors work, what inspired you?
Well, I like just about everybody else. You learn in the cinema. You learn by watching, but then you watch what people do. And back in Australia, when I started, there were other people in filmmakers cooperative, but there were no directors you could directly learn from. However, I started to read the books, and those interview books, by the way, where for instance, those AFI legendary directors, and you'd pick up directors with whom you felt simpatico, and the one, I mean, so many of them, but the one that seemed to be able to say it in the pithiest way was Hitchcock. I loved just when he it directly influenced the Fury Road movie when he said, "I try to make movies where they don't need to read the subtitles in Japan." That was a big one for me. And I love the other one which he said about suspense. Everyone knows it, but the suspense and surprise, which is that suspense is when you expect something to happen and it doesn't. And surprise is the opposite, when something happens when you don't expect it. He said, surprise is only one moment. Suspense can last almost a whole movie. Those simple little things were very important. But then, without making this a long answer, I did, when others in Australia were making movies, for instance, Peter Weir gave me some really, really valuable advice. I just finished the first Mad Max. It was... I'd never really been on a movie set before. I thought if you really planned the movie and you went out and shot it, that it basically would go okay. And I was completely bewildered by the process. It was, I describe it like a big dog. You want to take it for a walk that way and it drags you off this way. And I remember sitting down talking to Peter, who'd already done about 2 movies, and I said, I'm not cut out for this. And he said, but George, don't you realise that every movie is like this? You've got to think of it. It wasn't long after the Vietnam War, and he said, you've got to think about it like being on patrol in the jungle, and you've got to complete some sort of mission. You don't know where the landmines are, you don't know where the snipers are, but somehow you've got to find your way through it. So be alive to the adjustments that you need to make, and it's never going to be any different. And I then went on pretty soon after to make the second Mad Max, which was way more difficult than the first one. But with that advice in my head, I thought, okay, this is what the real world is like. And it's still like that. So that was very valuable.
Good advice. Good advice. Thank you. Alejandro, advice other directors gave you or inspired by other directors?
Yeah, I was lucky. I was in radio, so I was doing a lot of things in audio that were kind of a little storytelling, provoking characters and things. That was very good for me, and then I was lucky to have the opportunity to start shooting some commercials in Mexico. So I started shooting things, and once I was in the set, I was learning. I didn't study cinema. I was self-made, kind of understanding what was a set, a camera, 2 actors, and all things, and I had a great chance to fail and do so very bad things in this kind of little exercise. And I started thinking, I know how to do that. And then I was lucky to suddenly I felt that I was limited. I was just shooting things, but there was no understanding of many things. And I went into a theater class with a great teacher that was called Ludwig Margules, which he was from Poland, and he was a very minimalistic, very theoretical kind of genius guy, who actually, I think, studied with him 3 years theater. Really, he was the one who implanted in me what really means to be a director, what the responsibility you have in the set. I mean, his theory was you have to know more than anybody if you want to command people. So if you don't know about architecture or lighting or painting or dancing or narrative or drama, you really need to be responsible to be heading a bunch of people that will be very well prepared. And so I was panicked. I was terrified. I said, I better start really going. Suddenly he implanted in me the responsibility that you have when you go into a set commanding that. And I think I learned a lot from him. I remember that the best thing that he told me was, we were doing these little plays in the room, and I was kind of insecure and unsafe, and I asked a friend of mine, a production designer, to put some, a book stand and a table and blah, blah, blah. So the play finished, and then in front of the class, he literally humiliated me, as he should do. And he destroyed people in front of everybody, but he gave you big lessons. And he said, why you need this table? Why you need a book stand? Why you need this? I mean, like these props. And he said, can you don't convey me? Can you not convince me? Because he was from this Polish theater, like black theater, like abstract. And he was from this theory that if you cannot get only with the imagination and the actors and the pace and the things that the people imagine that universe without any element, then you are a failure. Yeah. And he was right. I didn't need these shitty things in a room, in a classroom. You know what I mean? I said, yes. So it was like the economic of things, like go to the DNA. And then, I started studying another person that I think was crucial for me, which I think is here. Where is Judith Weston? Are you here? Judith is one of the best teachers I have, and amazing. She has, books that really has inspired me, and I studied with her directing actors, and all the methods of Judith I really assimilate in a practical way. And then, obviously, as they are saying, watching films and reading Sculpting in Time of Tarkovsky changed my life. And when I see a filmmaker doing things that I don't understand, and probably will never be able to do, just implant me a poise that bites me, and I want to make something like that, and maybe I will never do, but that excites me and inspires me to keep doing and learning the process.
Thank you. Tom, for you, any advice that another director gave you or inspired by other directors?
Probably both. It's funny, panic seems to be the theme throughout all of these answers, which makes me feel so much better. I was a little panicked back there watching the clips together, which is pretty wonderful. When I was making my first film, The Station Agent, I had written this screenplay and been trying to get it made for years and was having a lot of trouble. And it finally happened very quickly. I had like $500,000, which at that time I thought was quite a bit of money. And I was really excited. And then as I got closer and closer and closer, I just had one of those moments of like, I'm an absolute fake. I really don't know what I'm doing. And I've convinced just enough people that I've started this train. And I really, it was like sort of the actor's nightmare in some way. And I went in, Sidney Lumet at that point was sort of my mentor. And I just called him and I was like, I have to come up. He was on the Upper West Side. I was downtown. And I have to talk to you because I think I may be having my first panic attack in my life. And he was like, oh, great, sweetheart, come right up. You know, Sid, that's everything. And yeah, he called me sweetheart quite a few times. But I think he called everyone that. But I went up there and he just knew where I was at. Like instantly, you know, he was a master and I was in his office and I was an idiot. And he just did a great job of sort of sitting me down and letting me talk for about 20 minutes and said, great. And then he said, to his, I think it's Penny, his longtime assistant, can you get me the script of The Verdict? And she brought in his shooting script and he just sat next to me and kind of flipped through the shooting script of The Verdict with his notes. And said, it's really not that hard. Look, see, I just did camera, and I'm going to do this, and look at that. And it's open on the pinball machine, and then and he just kind of talked me through like half the verdict. And in some weird way, it should have been ultimately incredibly intimidating. I mean, because I thought, well, I'm obviously never going to ever do that. But it was weirdly liberating because he just made it so, he really broke it down in such a simple way. And he just talked about, ultimately, I think my biggest fear at the time was just camera and blocking and how I was going to approach this film. And he just talked about really understanding what a movie was about and forcing myself as a director to take one final look at each scene and say, make sure you understand. Because I think as a writer, it's sometimes tricky because you live with the screenplay for so long. You think you understand it. And sometimes I think we all know you really don't understand it till after you've made the damn movie. But like going back at that last moment and being like, do I really understand exactly? And he said, if you understand exactly what that scene, you can shoot that scene very quickly. You'll know how you want to do it. You'll be able to impart that and articulate those ideas to your collaborators, and they will assist you in that, but it'll be crystal clear. And that somehow I thought, okay, that's something I can do. I can understand what this scene, and I have a place, a toehold in this process. So that Sid was, and he continued, and then visually he just continues to be a huge inspiration to me. So maybe that's a 2 in 1.
Very fortunate to have the master talk to you.
Incredibly fortunate, incredibly fortunate.
But Adam, for you, advice from other directors or directors who inspired you?
I think the big inspiration was when I was 17 years old, I watched Blue Velvet. And I watched it like at 9 o'clock at night. I went to sleep. And the next morning I got up and I was like, I dreamt that. There's no way I just saw a guy sing Candy Colored Clown into a Klieg light. And I had to go put the VHS tape back on and watch it again. And there were other directors at that time, like Alex Cox was a guy that I loved. And so pretty quickly I started realizing I love controlled chaos. I love when you don't know what's going to happen, yet there's a hand behind it. So I remember when we were shooting Anchorman, and we're shooting this crazy battle sequence where the news teams are all fighting. And at one point, I had a guy on fire. I had Steve Carell killing a guy with a trident. And this is all happening at once. A lot like Alejandro's scene we just saw. I don't want to argue about which is better. We can talk about that later. We were in a parking lot in downtown LA, which I think is where Alejandro shot his scene. But I remember having this moment of kind of glory of this is controlled chaos. So I always point to Lynch and Alex Cox as two guys that really influenced me.
Did anyone actually, any other director actually give you any specific advice? Because I know you've worked with others.
There was one guy I hung out, believe it or not, with Julian Schnabel for a little while in New York City. And I asked him at one point, I go, how do you make this jump from being this brilliant painter to like making these really good movies? Like he's a serious filmmaker. And he just said, it's all choices. He goes, it's the same thing. He goes, I make the same choices when I'm going to break the plates and paint on them, or I'm going to do the girl with the line through her eyes. I'm choosing the colors. I'm choosing the palette. I'm choosing the subject. And he said, I view directing as the exact same thing. It's thousands and thousands of choices. And he's like, I don't know how to operate a camera. I mean, I do a little bit, but he said, I don't know about the lens sizes, but I know the choices. And that was like, I started primarily as a writer, even though I did a bunch of short films on Saturday Night Live. But hearing that really kind of opened film up for me and made me not insecure to be with like, in the case of this movie, like a master DP like Barry Ackroyd. I could openly joke with Barry Ackroyd about how I don't know what that lens is. And we had ongoing bits where I would recommend made-up lenses to him. And you're going to use the Dubon 130. It's out of Madagascar. It might blow up, but give it a try. And once I kind of gave up that pretense of I have to know everything, it's just not the kind of director I am, then I was able to get into the flow with the technical side of it. It kind of freed it up for me. But that came from Schnabel, just saying it's just a series of choices.
You know, Ridley, in your movie, thank you, there's a line where, I think near the end, which sort of summarizes the process, which is first you solve one problem, then you solve the next problem and the next, and if you solve enough problems, you get to go home. So it seems to be problem after problem after problem. One of the things I want to talk about first is, in fact, pre-production, which is a bizarre time because, as you just talked about choices, there's so many choices that, you know, what location, who are we going to put in it, who are we going to work with, that it's a very sort of imbalanced time. Things aren't quite defined yet. And I'd like to talk about pre-production. I'm going to start talking specifically about your casting process. And what I'd like to look at is, I was just thinking this up here, if you were casting somebody to be the moderator of this particular symposium and a bunch of actors came in, how would you go about casting them? And we don't have to play that, but what I'm interested in... Huh? Got it, okay. What I'm interested in is when the actor is not somebody you're making an offer to. You already know that you want this person in your movie. But it's an actor who you're now going to discover. You know this is part. So I'm interested in how you go about that process, really, if an actor is coming in, or whether actors come in now. Maybe you see them all on tape and digital. How do you go through the process of choosing? I'm thinking specifically one actor. You may have offered it to him, but the one who plays Rich Parnell, who plays the astrodynamic guy. He's wonderful in the movie. He's in 2 or 3 scenes, and so not a lot. What was the process for you when you're looking for an actor that isn't already somebody you know you want to offer? What do you do?
As we all probably have different methods of working. I think we all do. I mean, and I'm a 2-take Charlie. I'll take 2 takes. In fact, I said to Matt, he said, how many takes do you take? I said, 2. He said, so what was it like with Clint? He said, well, he takes 1. And I discovered way back when I a very extended commercial career. My film school was 2,000 commercials. Right. So I could hit the ball from any direction, knew every lens inside out, and could walk on a set barely doing any homework and say, right, we put up 4 cameras, one there. But with that, you have to, people say, well, you don't need a camera. On the contrary, I need a really great cameraman because I'm really going to push it. So when you extend to 11 cameras, it's all about knowledge and intuition. I function entirely by intuition. So frequently, and once you've got the script, assuming you have the script, even as we're evolving the script, and I spend a lot of time with writers, and as the more and more time I spend with the writer, I'm already starting to see the film in my head because I can storyboard. And so I've already filmed the film on paper before I even start filming in my head. Mm-hmm. And the casting, I've already thought about the first 2 or 3 characters. So that said, you still need a great casting director. So then casting director turns up, who I use 1 of 2 here and 1 of 2 in London. And if they're available, and I said I thought of blah, 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 normally they say, yeah, if we can get them, we'll go for that. And then there's a myriad, usually, of other people to cast. And that's when I then start to commune with the casting director. And I always try to, if I can, find people I haven't seen before. Mm-hmm. And always trying to look for new people. You know, Brad Pitt, Sigourney Weaver hadn't done a movie. And I always remember with Sigourney, I had to, somebody said, there's this very tall girl doing off-Broadway theatre. Better go and see her. So I met with her. She turned up, she's like 6'6" in high heels. And she's got an afro, so she's like, I'm like a midget by her. And I met her, and it was all intuition.
But when you've worked with someone or when you find someone who you've not worked with before, I'm interested in that. Yeah. I don't know if there's anybody in the cast who were people that you've not worked before.
25 years ago, I'd read everybody.
Got it.
I'd be in the room reading with everybody, and then you discover things for your own process. And my process is I think a read is entirely artificial.
Right.
And therefore, I will look at faces, and it's nearly always a visual thing. I look at faces, think, interesting. Can I see their work? I'll always look at their work before I meet them.
Got it.
Because I think when you're walk a person in the room who sits down then and says, you want to read, it's not a good place to do it. And it's not really a rehearsal. So it's unfair, I think. So if I've already seen what they can do, if I really like them, I'm halfway into the field already. So when I meet them, I usually talk about everything but the film. I want to know who they are. And I want to know what they think about everything from politics to art. I really don't care. Chat, because what I'm looking for in an actor is somebody's going to surprise me. My job as a director, if I get a take and go, wow, I then say, do you want to go again? Because I've got it. And if they say I want to go again, I say, absolutely, so we'll go again. But so I always try and conform over the years, realize I must be in partnership with the person I'm bringing in.
When you're in that room and having a conversation about anything, have you noticed any particular item in those conversations that will reveal who that person is?
Yeah, when they start literally talking about the character. Because I think what's interesting, you first of all get them relaxed, because I don't care who the actor is. They're going to come in having never met you. They're not going to be relaxed. My job is to relax them in both there and on the floor. If I create a situation, an environment of safety for the actor then blossoms, because everyone in that room is wanting them to do well in that particular take, and therefore they just open up. And so it becomes much more of a rehearsal. Every take is like a rehearsal, even though I shoot on rehearsal. I never rehearse.
I agree. Thank you. Great. George, there's some amazing characters and actors in your piece. Some of them, you again, like Ridley, you may have known them, like the guy who plays Nux or Rictus, the brother character. They're just, what is your process if you haven't already seen that person's work? How do you meet them? How do you get accustomed? What happens with you in a casting session?
Well, one thing I know, it's different for each film. It's a different exercise. If there's lots of dialogue, then you're basically working off the existing material. But in Fury Road was atypical in that there's very little dialogue. Yet I needed to know that people could go out there and bring a character with the proper preparation and so on. So some of the actors, of course, I knew. I hadn't known Charlize Theron, Tom Hardy. I didn't know Nick Holt. And in fact, looking back on it, I didn't know most of the cast. But what I did, we did two things because we were casting out of Australia, United States, and Britain. We gave actors a choice. This is being taped with very good casting agents. And we gave them a choice of a number of scenes to play, very wordy scenes. Scenes from Network, the big monologues from Network. There was the dead parrot scene from Monty Python. Love scenes, just a whole mixture of scenes. And they just got the sides, maybe 1 or 2 pages. And by that very choice they made, was very, very interesting. If someone who, a young female actor chose to do Monty Python rather than do, say, a love scene or something, that was very, very interesting. And then when we narrowed it down,
and these scenes were all done on tape, so you're seeing
this was initially on tapes, right. And then when we narrowed it down, I worked with Nico Lathouris, who was one of the writers and also a fine dramaturg himself, and we would do pretty extensive work with the actors. Nick Holt, who I'd seen very young, I think it was 4 hours, but we always match up 2 actors, and they'd work together around a scene, and just to understand their agility, their flexibility, and basically have a good time with them.
But you'd work with 2 actors in this casting process, so there'd be 2 people.
Yeah, usually, it was 2 people, not necessarily up for the same role, But and again, it was scenes we wrote, nothing to do with the movie, but around that, just to see the way they approached the work. And it was very interesting. And what I like is that eventually they said, oh, they had a good time at least in that process. Exactly what you said, Ridley. It's so much about relaxation, creating the safe space and so on. So, but ultimately, it's all an intuitive process, but that intuition is informed by kind of intellectual rigor. I won't say intellectual, but you have to think it through, and then the final decision is just like falling in love. Who?
Do you ever go through the agonizing, oh, this one or that one, and I like both of them, and how do you make that decision at the moment when you're saying this is the one I'm going with?
I have done, and not necessarily in this movie, because it's all pretty clear. But you're also mixing and matching. You're putting a group of people together. So and in this case, you really have to look at the colours and everything that you think that person might bring.
Were there parts for you in this that were challenges to find? Other than, I suspect, the little man with the binoculars, I suspect there was, you had to find him and found him. But
well, I made that role for him. I needed, he was somebody I knew, a wonderful guy, Quentin, and Quentin Kennehan, and he's a film director, and he has that soft bone disease, but he does commercials, he does video clips and so on, and I thought, is there a way that we could fit him in? And then it suddenly occurred to me, oh, he would be, he would work because he's not very mobile and so on. But
well, that's an interesting idea. That's adapting a role for a personality, a human being that you're really interested in having in your movie.
Well, he suited it very, very much, and he was very interesting. And it wasn't just, oh, I'll make a role for you. It was, oh, okay, this is what he's able to bring. I tried to fit him in somewhere else, didn't work, and then it certainly occurred to me, this could really serve the story. Ultimately, the Morton Joe, the tyrant, is looking for healthy heirs, and he has two sons. One is a child in a man's body, and the other is a man in a child's body. In the past, I've had roles I never thought I could cast, and then at a certain point, it's really interesting. At a certain point, you lock into somebody, and you think no one else can play them, and we know so historically. People desperately wanted to play one role and someone else plays it iconically. So you've got to be open. But I remember Jack Nicholson, I think is one of the wisest men I ever met, said, just remember that once you've cast the movie, that person is perfect for the role. and I think it's true.
That's great. I like that one. Thank you for that. Tom, there are some very powerful performances that sometimes people are in one scene, like Father Paquin, when you knock on the door and we suddenly meet this man. How do you go about the process of casting? Being an actor yourself, if I remember correctly, this is something you know. So, and you've been in that position. What's your process of casting?
I think they're all similar in some way, right? I will say it's a part of the process, coming up as an actor, that I really enjoy. I think it's as we all know, being a director, there's so many facets to the job. That particular facet, I take a lot of joy. And I never. It's interesting you were talking about the pressure and stuff, Alejandro, because I never feel that, because I think I'm just so. Now I probably will, and you've ruined it for me, so thank you. Now that I know, I can screw everything up. I never knew that before. Damn it, I shouldn't have done this panel. But there's, I think, having been in that room, and Ridley said this, and it's true, that the rehearsal room is in no way conducive to anything creative, even with very experienced actors. I've seen some wonderful actors come in and just push or sell or try too hard or just be uncomfortable or just not want to be there, and it's understandable. So I think part of the job is making that room much more of a discussion and a dialogue about character than it is a test or an audition. And I think that's tricky. I think, one thing having come up as an actor, I had a chance to work with a lot of very good directors and watch the different processes, and some not so good. See some where I thought, well, that's not helpful to me how he gave direction, and that is, or, whoever that is. And I mean, someone mentioned Clint earlier, and I worked with him once, and he really is one take. And it's terrifying, and he's like, I was like, you sure I got that? He's like, yeah, I'm sure. And walked away. And I'm like, all right. And I don't think his DP liked it very much either. DP's like, double check the gate, triple check the gate. But that's Clint, But I feel like specifically with this film, it was the largest cast I've ever had. And it was, look, that first, the top of the bench, right? My first 8 or 10 people on the call sheet are incredibly experienced actors, right? Have worked collectively quite a bit, and I felt very safe where I was with that casting. But then a lot of it was all these people who come in for 1 or 2 scenes. Richard O'Rourke is that actor, is a local Boston actor. It's a terrific example. Just something about his look, his face, where I believe this guy could possibly be a priest at one time and could possibly, it sounds horrible, but done bad things. I could hear myself saying it. I was on the train. Full disclosure, I was in The Wire in the 5th season as, in some ways one of the most hated characters. I was this weaselly white guy. There was nothing cool about me, and I was a really bad journalist. And I remember David Simon called me when I was editing The Visitor, and he said, I've got this part. I think you're perfect for it. But I didn't know what it was because he never shows you until the next episode. And at first I'm like, this guy's cool. And then halfway through I'm like, I'm the biggest on the show, and I was. Everyone hated me. So I guess he saw something in my character that was weaselly. So I saw something in Richard. But with these people, it was
But
really.
what's the process? Are you meeting them?
I just bring them in. Yeah, I would just go. I'm still with this. I feel like I really had to be in the room because a lot of these guys weren't experienced.
And who else is in the room with you?
This time, sometimes my co-writer Josh Singer, just because he was really involved and really wanted to be, and he hadn't been. And I'm pretty open that way. But I don't have a lot of people. I rarely have producers or anyone else in the room. It's got to be as simple as possible when people come in. And there was another guy, Jimmy LeBlanc, who plays Patrick McSorley.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, he's one of the survivors, and who has the tracks on his arm, and an amazing scene with Stanley and Mark Ruffalo. And that guy, he's been in a few of Ben's movies in Boston, but like really small, almost extra roles. But he hasn't done anything. He's like a working member of the Sheet Metals Union.
I want to say something because I think that what is fantastic about your film too is not only the main caster, but all these victims, all these guys.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes that what make a film much more powerful is not the principal, but the secondary, or even the guy that has one line can define the whole film, and that's where the film really. And I think in your film is especially true in those characters that just come in and go out for one scene, but it gives the gravitas. I was really impressed about that cast as well.
Now, when they come in, because let's discover what your process is. Here's this actor who played Patrick.
Yeah.
Coming in, do you engage in conversation? Do you actually have him
read?
Do you read with him?
He was particularly tough. That's why I brought him up, because he was just a tough guy. He's from Southie. He knows, as we talked later, he knows those people. In fact, I always rehearse for at least a couple of weeks. This cast was hard to get together because they were so big and they all work so much. They're hard, but we finally got together in New York. And I brought him in one day, and it was him and Tucci and Mark Ruffalo, and Keaton was there. And he just came in and was kind of ice and was like really into it, and was good. And I could tell he'd never been in a rehearsal room. I could just tell that he didn't know what was going on, what we were doing. We sat down, but he handled himself really well. And I kind of walked him out afterwards. I said, that was really good. It's first step. We're not about getting there yet. My rehearsals aren't about performance. They're just about getting everyone on the same page, developing a dialogue. With this particular movie, really understanding the material, which he did. He knew people that were abused. He knew the priests. He knew the parishes. He came from that community. It's a really small community. So he was like really helpful. But I remember I was walking him out, and I was like, that was great. He's like, yeah. And I was like, you cool? Because you seem really comfortable. You're not freaked out by these guys? And he just stops. He goes, of course I'm freaked out. That was the Hulk and Batman and that guy from... He's like, the best was he goes, the Hulk and Batman and that guy from The Devils Wear Prada, which I thought was like amazing. But he covered, and he was tough, but he had his own journey.
I want to go back a bit. What made you decide to cast him? And again,
Really, because what I needed in this film, and this was a big point of debate production-wise, because we split our production between Boston and Toronto. And this was something I was really, really fighting against, because Boston is the movie. And we were at the point where we were not going to make the movie. Sometime you got to teach me how to get more money, because I'm not that good at it. And I was going to pull the plug. So I was just getting to a point where I had days, and it was just not going to, I wasn't going to make this movie. It was too important to me. And my line producer, Michael Biederman, really saved the film by figuring out, he just broke it all down. He's like, look, we shoot everything in Boston that we need to, and we just go build one set in Toronto, the newsroom and the spotlight office. We can't shoot that in Boston anyway, so who cares if we're in Brockton or Toronto? And we can make it work, and we'll come back seasonally. My one caveat to that was, okay, any actor that has one line that I need has got to come from Boston and from the community. Now, look, there's some amazing, as I found later, and I relented because I found a few, there's some amazing actors in Toronto because it's such a shop town, right? Yeah. And you've got this culture of character actors who come in and give you great performances. But I needed these actors to come up. For instance, the woman at the front desk at the Globe, who's got one scene at the end of the movie where she says, great article, boys. He comes in and she says, the phones haven't rang all day. You know, Marty sent two of mine down to Spotlight. And she just had this voice and this face and was from there. And I was like, I got to have her, you know. And so I brought her up. And that was really tricky. You know, that's what I needed, people who would really bring that level of authenticity to this culture. Keep in mind, I got lucky with the reporters. I didn't have to have a lot of actors do those accents because of one, it's an incredibly tricky accent to get right? We know that. And the reason is it's so varied. But as it turns out, Resendez wasn't really from Boston. You know, Sasha wasn't really from Boston. They all ended up there very early in their lives, but they didn't have that.
The character that's Steve, the other...
Yeah, so Rachel's character and Ruffalo's character, they didn't have to do it. And with Robbie in that accent, with Michael was really concerned about. And he did some great work with this dialect coach, Steve Gabus, out of New York. Terrific.
I want to still jump in one more time.
Why, are you saying I'm going off track?
No. You're doing just fine. You do not have to panic, Dustin. You're doing just fine. My question is, like, for example, when someone like who played Nana comes in.
Yeah.
And it's a spectacular moment when she asks for a glass of water.
Yeah, it's the one moment in the movie where I get emotional when I see it, and I haven't seen it in a long time, but I think because she feels like a lot of my family that I grew up with, and that Nana was another woman who we just found. She'd never acted a day in her life. She's the woman in the scene who asked Rachel for a glass of water.
And how did you find her?
They're having, what'd you say?
No, how did you find her? You said you never acted.
Am I having fun? I was like, yeah, I am. Thanks for checking in. I'm just starting to have fun.
Good.
We just auditioned, and she came in, and she's a great example. We were shooting in this tiny house that we found. It was really, you know, it's one of those scenes that we should have been in and out in 20 minutes because the scene's so simple. But it was so small that no crew member could move, and so it took like 9 hours. And we're all like, where the hell is the day going, you know? And it was so frustrating, and it was a big moment for Rachel. And literally 5 minutes before Nana gave that great reading of that line, can I have a glass of water? She just was like watching it all and getting tired and getting cranky. And she just finally looked at me and she was just like, this is the silliest thing I've ever done, you know? And I was just like, oh, that's not helpful right now. You know, poor Rachel's like locked down and, you know, but then I had to sit there and talk to her and kind of get her into that place. And I started talking, literally in that instance, I started talking about the story. I started talking about, because she read every article. Everyone in Boston did. As a lot of the older people we talked to, it was their TV. They would wait for that Globe to arrive. They would get their coffee and they would read and they would be absolutely gutted and horrified. And she remembered that. And she started talking about her own stories. And then we were ready to roll. She was there.
And when you were in the casting session with her, did she read for you? Did you just talk to her?
She did, and she wasn't great. I think it's a little bit what Alejandro's saying. There just comes a time where you're like, I'm not going to get any better than this. And that's a combination of face and spirit and voice and authenticity. And I can make this work. And as a director, that's our job sometimes, to figure out a way to make it work. And I think with her, in my gut, I thought I would get her there.
Got it. Adam, you had also a large cast. What's your process, particularly after you've got your stars? What's your process of dealing with the other parts?
Well, yeah, we had our big names, obviously, that you know, were sort of at the center of the studio green-lighting the movie when you have Christian Bale and Ryan Gosling and these people. I always, even with those people, I have to meet with them beforehand because I work in an unusual way. So I have to make sure they're going to be okay with it. And basically what I do is I almost am like two directors when it comes to doing a scene. And even in the audition, the first part I'll be like David Mamet, where you better fucking say every single word I wrote. And I want to hear the scene exactly the way it was written. And then halfway through the audition, I completely shift and I become like Del Close. And suddenly it's, don't do anything I wrote. What would you do? Let's mess around with it. Let's try this. And so with people like Christian Bale, he's obviously not auditioning, but I wanted him to know we had a conversation about it. Like, I'm going to do this. We're going to do the as written. We're going to get it. And then I'm going to completely pull the script out from underneath you and we're going to just mess around. And I'm going to throw stuff out at you from behind the camera. Are you okay with that? And fortunately, they all were. So when you're auditioning roles like, a great example is John Magero and Finn Wittrock play the kind of young guys in the movie, Jamie and Charlie. And they're really good actors. And they came in and they read the script perfectly. And I said, I want both of them. So I got both of them in the room. And I just started having them do scenes that aren't in the movie. I just said, let's do the scene before this scene. Before you guys decide to go into that big bank to see if you can get in. I want to see you walking in and how excited you are that this is your big chance. And they kind of looked at me like, what? And then they just did it. So what I'm always looking for is like, you know, on our best days, we're right about 80% of the time. Like the best day I've ever had, I was right 80% of the time. So you want to make sure when you show up on that set and you've planned everything and you've written everything and the wardrobe's there and the lighting's there and everything's perfect, there's always something just different in the air that you didn't anticipate. And I want to make sure the actors I have can go with that if there's something interesting happening. And there are some brilliant actors out there who can read scripts up and down and are just amazing. And I've bumped into a few of them, but when you take them off that script, they freeze a little bit. And I don't blame them if you're not comfortable with that. The best example I ever had with that was Richard Jenkins, who I love. I needed him to play a character in Step Brothers, actually. And it's a pretty wild character. It's one of the craziest movies we ever made. So I needed a guy who had authority, yet could completely go off the script. And Jenkins is a guy who did experimental theater in the 1960s. He has that authority. He's an amazing guy. You've worked with him, Tom. He's the best. So there's a scene at the end of the movie where he's talking to John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell, and he's giving him the moral of the movie. And I'm behind the camera, and I just go, Richard, tell him something about how when you were a kid, you pretended to be a dinosaur, but you had to give that up. And Richard goes, what? And I go, you know, something like when I was a little kid, I used to pretend to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex and I would chase dogs and cats around the neighborhood. But I grew up and now I can't do my dinosaur anymore. Don't lose your dinosaur. And he's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. It's just film. It doesn't matter. Just go. And like, so he did a take and it was pretty good. I go, Richard, there's something there. And he's like, all right. And we did one more take and it was great. And then at the premiere, he walks up to me and he goes, please tell me you did not use that dinosaur speech. And it got applause. Like it's one of the lines in the movie that's quoted the most. And so we had that. I didn't do as much improv with The Big Short, but there's a lot of key moments that came out of that where, for instance, Brad Pitt is on the phone with Jamie and Charlie. And once again, I told them after 3 or 4 takes where we've got the script, I said, let's mess around. Anything you want to try. And in one take, Brad just said, all right, I got to get going. I have to go get a colonic. And Finn Wittrock just outright broke. And God bless my editor, Hank Corwin, put the break in the movie. And it just feels so real. So you get these mistakes and overlaps out of it. Yet at the same time, you want to be Mamet. You want to be hard about the script, you know.
You've picked up a subject that I actually want to deal with, which is in fact the issue of what I'm going to call the happy accident. So I want you all to talk about the idea of the happy accident, meaning that we've planned everything, but there's another element that happens. But before you go there, I want to go back to the casting session one more time with you.
Sure.
What parts were challenges for you to cast? For example, the guy who plays the Chow in the scene we just saw, was he a difficult part to find?
The Byron Mann you're talking about? Yeah, we read a lot of people for that. I like Alejandro, had the great benefit of having Francine Mazur, who's like the best casting director ever. So like anyone she brings you is in the ballpark of they could do the role. So we read a lot of people for that role because you didn't want him to be too arch. You just wanted him to be comfortable.
And when you say read, I want to just back off. Are you now seeing tapes that have been made that you're seeing, or are these people coming into your office?
Mix. She's showing me tapes. Do you want to bring this person in? I'm saying no, yes, no. I also, by the way, told Francine under the premise of on our best day, we're right 80% of the time. I said, you can overrule me. And one of the people she showed me was John Magero, who was in that David Chase movie. And I liked him. He's a really good actor. But I thought, oh, he's not right for Charlie. And she went, I overruled you. I had him come in and read. And then sure enough, she was right. He was amazing. Right. And so the only thing I always say is don't overrule me too much. But you get there's a couple times you can do it. And
so for this part.
So in the case of Byron Mann, yeah, that was a guy. We probably read like 11 people for that role. It's one of the harder ones. But I thought the local casting is the biggest challenge.
I got that. What made you make the decision?
He played it. The real guy, Wing Chao is a real guy, and these people had no idea. There's actually a social dynamic for it. There's actually a psychological name for it, like Kahneman and Tversky talk about it, where people will justify their own good fortune no matter what. So you can go up to a random person and give them $10 million, and 2 weeks later they'll be like, I always knew this was going to happen. I'm just that kind of guy. And a lot of Wall Street has that. And with all due respect to any Wall Street people. But actually, no respect to any Wall Street people. Fuck them. So I wanted Byron Mann to have that going on. I didn't want him to in any way think he was the villain. I didn't want him to in any way think he was evil, doing anything wrong. He was a guy who figured it out. The real guy went from making $110,000 a year to $20 million a year in 1 year. And it was all because of this fraudulent security system that was going on, these derivatives. And Byron played it like a guy who was on top of the world. Like if you changed that scene and said, Carell's a crazy man, Byron Mann's a hero, you could watch it again and Byron's smugness becomes like, what are you talking about? Like, and I really wanted that.
And you saw it in the room in the casting?
I saw it in the room in the casting. And then when he got on the set, Carell just walked up to me and goes, great casting. This guy's perfect.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this exclusive discussion. You can watch the full video of this feature film symposium and many other director Q&As on our website at dga.org/events. Be sure to download next week's episode as our 5 feature film nominees continue their discussion covering topics like working with actors and appreciating happy accidents on set. If you're enjoying The Director's Cut, please subscribe to it on iTunes or our SoundCloud page so you won't miss an episode. And leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. We hope you hear from us soon. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.